This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
This week's Check the Report episode is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Check the Report listeners get 20% off the first year of an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/DSP.
All right, Vito, let's check the report this week. Our third edition of the Check the Report podcast. I'm greatly looking forward to it. Always enjoy an opportunity to talk basketball. This week, the guest will be James Edwards from The Athletic, and one other guest. Who will it be?
Shameek Mohile of PistonPowered.com, and he's a guy that's in the know about the Detroit Pistons, their latest 20-16 currently. We're 16-20 at this point last season, and he lives in the Central Time Zone. I wonder how darn cold it is for him, because we know in the cold Detroit, Michigan area, all throughout Michigan, Doc, it's been way too darn cold.
At this point in time, Vito, the Pistons are 20-16, had a chance to kind of peek into the Heat game. My goodness, you saw what the Pistons look like without Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson. The Heat were able to get whatever they wanted on the inside, and it just seemed like the Pistons had no answers, and it was a kind of a loss that I was disappointed in. But again, Andre Drummond's injured, Reggie Jackson's injured, Avery Bradley's working his way back. So with the Pistons, it's a little bit fascinating in terms of the runs that they go on. They win a couple games at home, they go on the road, and they seem to struggle at this point in time in the season playing on the road. Upcoming, when this podcast drops, they're going to play a game at Philadelphia, and they got a little bit of a tough schedule coming up, but it'll be interesting to see how this team responds to Andre coming back, because I don't think Andre's going to miss out an opportunity to face off against Joel Embiid, because Embiid has called him out, and it's kind of a budding rivalry, a rivalry that I do enjoy. It's nice to see a little bit of trash talk on Twitter, but unfortunately, our guy, Andre Drummond, has been taking the worst of it, because Embiid called him out for not playing defense and then went to trash him in a couple games. The Pistons kind of have struggled a little bit versus the Sixers, and Joel Embiid has performed well.
Friday night against the Sixers in Philly against the rejuvenated Philadelphia 76ers. Looking really solid, Joel Embiid. He can't play back-to-back nights, though. Colin Cowherd went on a rant the other day on his show about how he's not a star. How can he be a star if he can't play back-to-back nights? You have to be reliable. If you're not reliable, as in any job he was saying, well, then you're not a star. You're not a stud in your given profession. And Joel Embiid is not a stud in his given profession because he can't play every night. He can't suit up every night. So I love the guy. I love his trash-talking ability, by the way. And he's funny. He's a great follow on Twitter. And that's all good and dandy. But the thing is, well, let's play more often, more consistently, and I know it's based on the 76ers once again, too, and how they've been managing his minutes game to game.
Now, what was your take on the Avery Bradley situation? Adam and I got a chance to talk about it on WDFN last Friday. The Pistons have been hush-hush. They have not been willing to discuss it. Reporters have gone out to practice a couple times. We'll probably get a chance to talk to James about it. Maybe you'll ask Shameek as well regarding what's going on with Avery Bradley. But right now what they're doing is the common thing that you do in PR is you deflect it. In PR, what you do is when Avery Bradley's asked about it, he's kind of redirecting people to his attorney and to the statements that have been made regarding the fact that, hey, we're not going to talk about it. This was settled. This is old news and things like that. But I do believe it is a story that's there that will be expounded upon because of the nature of what it was about in terms of an alleged sexual assault. Avery Bradley was not found guilty. This never went to court. He was never charged with anything, but he settled an allegation out of court, paid this woman maybe around up to $400K to keep this quiet. It's a fascinating look at what's been going on, because many people do not agree with the notion of, hey, if you're innocent, if you did not do these things, why are you paying off this woman?
Well, it always looks bad when you're paying off your accuser, you're hushing her. Not a good look, not good PR, and Avery said it was because of a confidentiality agreement. Well, still, it looks bad. And this occurred when he was a member of the Boston Celtics, but still, it occurred. It's not a great thing to be involved with. And he obviously committed an act that is illegal, is immoral, and it looks bad for the man that is Avery Bradley at this point in time, Doc.
All right, let's get James Edwards on the phone. He is a athletic Detroit Pistons beat writer. He follows the team around. I think the opportunity to talk to him, because he's around the team every single day, travels with the team, I think a conversation with him will definitely help us gain insight regarding the Pistons, their current play, and what we can look for realistically from them in this next stretch of games. Let's get James Edwards on the line right now. As advertised, joining us on this third edition of the Check the Report podcast, James Edwards, the Detroit Pistons beat writer for The Athletic Detroit. You can check out his great work, theathletic.com/DSP, if you want 20% savings off a year subscription. James, Happy New Year. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year to you as well. Yeah, we're straight from the cold to Miami, and now we're going into what appears to be an avalanche in Philadelphia. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, tell us about the pulse of the Pistons at this time. I know it was a tough loss versus the Miami Heat, but the Pistons are dealing with some injuries. They were without Andre Drummond. What was the vibe from Stan Van Gundy and the team when you came from practice?
So today at practice, Stan had a much better vibe, as he usually does the following day than right after the game. He knows why they lost. Everyone knows. If they watch the game, Miami got into the paint at will. And if it didn't lead to a layup, it was leading to three-pointers. The Heat hit 17 of 34 from three in the game, and I think they scored 95 combined points from the paint and three-point line. And honestly, if you look at it, the Pistons are lucky they didn't get blown out of the gym with numbers like that. But yeah, Andre Drummond has a right rib bruise, something he injured in practice, and it's not anything that they feel is major. And there's really not too much you can do. It's for him, how much pain can he tolerate? And then with Embiid in town, or them going to Philly tomorrow against Embiid, it'd be interesting to see if he misses that game. Avery Bradley returned last night, and it took him a while to get into the groove, but he hit some big shots late. Reggie Jackson, as everybody knows, is out for another month and a half, 2 months with that grade 3 right ankle sprain. So they were out without some key pieces, working in some key pieces, and then they ran into a Heat team that was, for lack of a better term, on fire from deep.
The Detroit Pistons currently sit at 20 wins, 16 losses, 6th place in the Eastern Conference. What's been your fairest assessment of this team? Because a lot of fans, when we debate back and forth on our Twitter page, either they're not invested as much as they can be because of the lack of a superstar, or they don't believe that this team can take the biggest step to compete in the postseason. And then you got the hardcore fans who are really, really critical of the superstars on the team, like an Andre Drummond, like a Reggie Jackson, and looking at Stan Van Gundy. But what's your fair assessment of this Detroit Pistons team? Tell our audience.
I think people just need to find a middle ground. I think people's expectations going into the year were that this team should be a playoff team, but they shouldn't be any higher than a 7th or 8th seed. And then they get out to a 14-6 start, and then people are like, oh my gosh, is this team a 2nd seed, a 3rd seed? And then they lose some games as happens in the NBA, and now everyone's freaking out. If anybody went into the season thinking that this team would be 20-16 after 36 games, then they should probably go play the lotto, because I don't think many people expected that. And Andre Drummond's playing having the best year of his career. His points and his rebounds and are all the same, but his assist numbers are almost quadrupled. His free throws percentage is up by almost half. Reggie Jackson was kind of easing into his new role as a distributor right before he got hurt. Tobias Harris has played pretty consistent all year on the offensive end. So, if people want this team to go and win a championship, then I wouldn't hold your breath. This isn't a team that's built for that right now. And I know this is a championship league, as is professional sports, but there should be some how do I want to say this? There should be some appreciation from the fan base if this team can become like the Toronto Raptors, where maybe they're fighting for 3, 4, 2 seeds every year, and they might not win it all, but they'll put up a fight in the postseason. And for everything that we've seen this year makes you think that this team has a chance to put up a fight in the postseason. It just really depends on the matchup.
Yeah, sitting here, one of the big concerns that people will message us is when the Pistons have off games, it seems like SVG is coming out regularly and saying, look, it's not a talent thing, it's an effort thing. And many times in the last 2 seasons, SVG has had to come out and said, hey, we haven't played great basketball. We haven't come out and looked like a team that was ready to play. What do you make of that? Do you call it, sometimes some schedule losses, or what do you make of the up and down nature of the team? And when they do have these losses, they seem to be of an epic nature.
No, I definitely think they do have a few schedule losses on their resume. They've had one of the toughest schedules, if not the toughest schedule, through like 30 games this year. I think they were like 0.01 behind Philly in terms of SOS. But yeah, you hear Van Gundy talk about effort, and sometimes you don't see the effort consistently. He's also a coach, and I think that's just his nature, is he's never really satisfied. There's been maybe a handful of games this year that after the game he's been satisfied with his team's play, but he's still always found something to kind of to pick at. But that's just who he is. You see it. I don't want to say they're not trying, because everybody that's on the floor is trying. There's times where they maybe lose focus and have some mental errors, and I think that's a big thing. But most of the time, you see these teams give an effort. There's very few teams in professional sports that don't try. And I think that's kind of more what he means is the mental effort, the mental capacity to stay engaged for 48 minutes. And that all kind of couples together with energy as well.
One of the players that's absent, Reggie Jackson, key injury. What have you seen from the team since he's gone down?
They've really rallied around Ish Smith. Obviously nobody wants to see Reggie, a guy that's well liked in the locker room, to go down, especially given what happened to him last year and he missed so many games. But they're all very confident in Ish Smith. I remember the game that Reggie went down. Andre Drummond said that he doesn't think we'll miss a beat. Obviously, Ish didn't play great last night, but the first two games he had 18 points in his first two starts. So it's just getting acclimated, him continuing to find his role. I wrote a piece today on The Athletic about how him and assistant coach Otis Smith had a conversation during the first quarter of that Magic game when Ish was being tentative and he wasn't playing with that ferocity and that speed and that quickness and kind of that attack first mentality that he has. And ever since then, he's had that. Just last night, the shots didn't fall for him.
Stanley Johnson is a player that a lot of fans are looking at as well in terms of his draft position and his offensive struggles here and there. But in terms of what you've seen on the court and what you've seen in practice, what can we as fans look to in terms of how to project a guy like Stanley Johnson and what he can realistically contribute to the team?
And that's another guy we left off. He's injured as well. He has a hip flexor strain and didn't play last night. If I recall, I think he missed the game before. Yeah, he missed the game before as well. And they're going to see if he can go tomorrow. But I mean, I think you've seen an improved Stanley Johnson offensively since he went to the bench in favor of Reggie Bullock, Reggie Bullock has been outstanding since he's been into the starting lineup. Had another big night against Miami, but Stanley is in a situation now where he's with a second unit that needs scoring. They need him to have the ball in his hand. They need him to attack and be aggressive. And I think you just see a little bit more confidence in him when he is on the floor. The shots might not always fall, but you can just see he's getting to the rim. He's not as tentative as he was with that starting unit. And the reason for him being tentative and kind of holding back in that first unit with the starters is he knew he was the fifth option. There was four other guys that were primary options for him, and he was stuck in the corner, and he wasn't hitting jump shots. He's not a great cutter, and that's kind of why Van Gundy flipped him. And Reggie Bullock is a great cutter, and he's a very good three-point shooter. So Stanley's able to have the ball in his hands more in that second unit. And he's a guy defensively. Late in games, if you need a stop, he's going to be in there. Offensively, you're not going to rely on him for much, but if you can just get an efficient night out of Stanley, whether it's 3 of 5, 4 of 6, 4 of 7, 3 of 6, just something to kind of make use of his time offensively, I think that's what everybody wants.
Now, a very surprising report came out last week, reported by TMZ Sports, that Avery Bradley had settled an issue in terms of sexual assault, allegedly, that occurred last season. He settled the case so as to not go to court and not to have any issues or any of the information released publicly. Since Avery Bradley's been back around practice, has there been talk or further discussion regarding it, or has the notion around the Pistons been just to continue with the notion of we're not going to discuss it?
Yeah, the Pistons haven't discussed it because it's a situation that, as you said, was reportedly settled. It has nothing to do with really anything that they're doing. And then Avery Bradley is declined comment on it. I think he's referring people to elsewhere. He hasn't said anything about it. But that's a situation that be interesting to see what else unfolds with that. But yeah, it's something that they're all tight-lipped about and kind of focus on basketball activities as it stands.
With your work with The Athletic, you have the opportunity to get a little bit more in-depth with the players. You have an opportunity to write some feature pieces. Can you name one or two players that you've had a chance to talk deeper with and get to know, and anything you could share with the audience here?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, Ish Smith, like I said, I have a piece on him today where it kind of picked his brain and picked the conversation he had with Otis Smith. Last week I did something on Anthony Tolliver. As people know, he's a journeyman at 32, though. He's kind of playing the best basketball of his career, and he's been all over the world, different parts of the league. I did stuff on Tobias Harris early in the year where he told me he had LASIK eye surgery. It's kind of helped him out in his three-point shooting, and I actually have another feature piece coming with him this weekend. And then who else? I've done another one. Oh, Dwight Bikes, the guy who's on the two-way player who's been brought up in Reggie Jackson's absence. He played. He had a good game last night, 14 points. To talk about him, he's a 28-year-old who's never really stuck in the NBA. He's played across the G Leagues, played in China, had a cup of coffee with the Raptors and the Lakers, and I did a big profile on him. So if you guys go to theathletic.com and check that out, I think you guys will like him, and I appreciate you letting me plug that.
No problem, James. Your work is excellent. I've given you a bunch of awesome on the ratings there after I read your articles.
I appreciate that. No, that helps. I was wondering why my stuff was higher than I thought it would be. And now I know. Now I know it's you.
Now, tell me a little bit about a player like Anthony Tolliver, because like you said, he's playing the best that he ever has. Many people have noticed, like, okay, there is such a thing as a Tolliver effect. He seems to be a glue guy, a leader guy, spent some time away from the Pistons, now back with them. What does he bring to the table, and what do you think is contributing to his performance this year, like you said, playing the best basketball of his career?
No, he told me he just knows who he is as a player now. He knows he's in there to bring energy. He knows he's there to bring experience. He knows he's there to be a stout defender, and he knows he's there to hit some three-point shots. And he's going through a little bit of a lull offensively right now, but for most of the year he's been hitting the three-ball at a consistent rate. And defensively he's been sound. He's been one of the, if not one of the top three defenders throughout the year for the Pistons. And you've seen his work against Porzingis. He's kind of the Porzingis stopper. He's done other work against Melo and Paul George, those like. So he's a guy that really just knows where he fits in the NBA. He's embraced that, and he's able to kind of play with a calmness about him. And that's one thing Stan always says, there's whether AT is going through an up or a down in terms of his play, his mental outlook is never wavering. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing. And that's what you get for somebody in his position that's 32 and has been all over the NBA and all over the world kind of playing basketball.
You can follow James on Twitter at JL Edwards 3 eyes. Follow him on Twitter, a great follow. Now, you're a Michigan State grad, so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you. Michigan State, #1 ranked team in college basketball. The potential's there for this team to have a solid season. When you peek in on them a little bit, do you think that, the expectation is fair for this team to win it all, to get Tom Izzo and to get this notion that he's just a lucky coach that got it that one time? Does he need that second title to validate his career in your eyes?
Oh, he definitely needs a second one. And I'm one of those, if you're not first, you're last type of guys. So especially now that it's my alma mater, you want to see him get one more. And then when Miles Bridges says he's coming back and return Langford, you add Jaren Jackson, you bring back Cassius, that team knew what they were hoping for as soon as Miles said he was coming back. And that was nothing short of a national championship. I know it's hard in a one-and-done tournament, but I think in terms of experience, in terms of skill, in terms of camaraderie, I don't think there's not a better team in the country than Michigan State. And I think this is the year to do it. I don't know how much longer Miles will be around, and I don't know how much longer Jaren Jackson will be around. And this is one of the most skilled teams, one of the most athletic teams he's had. And I think this is going to be the year. I'd be upset if he didn't at least get in the title game with this team.
Okay, I have to ask, because everybody knows that some teams just have an opponent that just owns them, and for Michigan State, it's Duke. So it's time, the bracket comes out. Do you want to see Michigan State face Duke to get over the hump, or does it put fear in you? Because I would be honest to say, look, I would be perfectly happy, get those 6 wins, and avoid Duke, because Duke is Duke, and they seem to present Michigan State a lot of problems. Do you want to face them to get over the hump? Or, look, let's just get the title and avoid one of the best teams in the country, an organization that's beat your team quite a bit?
I'm one of those guys. You gotta be the best. You gotta beat the best to be the best. And I know you obviously don't want to see them early on. If you can avoid that, that's probably a game people would rather see as a national championship type game. But yeah, I mean, Duke has had Michigan State's number. Coach K has had Izzo's number. He's talked about it. They've talked about it publicly. It's definitely, there's something there. But I mean, if you want to be considered the top dog, at some point you got to knock off the top dog. And if you can send a message earlier in the tournament, I think that one gives you the confidence to inside the program, and two, maybe send some shockwaves across the other people who would they'd be facing potentially on the way to a national title run.
James, continued success. We look forward to reading more of your work, more of your features. Keep up the great work. We look forward to talking to you again.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, once again, hope you had a good holidays, and we'll talk soon.
Wow, good stuff from James at The Athletic. Again, if you want to subscribe to The Athletic, both Vito and I do, amazing articles, in-depth feature articles, good critical analysis. I'm really a fan. I've been reading a lot of the articles. I've checked them out. So if you want to get 20% off a year subscription, again, help us out, and you can help by subscribing to The Athletic by visiting theathletic.com/DSP. And when you sign up for a year subscription, you get 20% off, and you're helping out the cause. You're helping us keep the lights on here in the studio and helping put a little bit of money in Vito's pocket.
I could use that, so thanks, Doc, for trying to pay me, I guess.
Who are we getting on the line next?
We have Shameek Mohile of PistonPower.com joining us right now. Now joining me on this episode of Check the Report is Shameek Mohile of PistonPower.com. Shameek, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good. And you told me you live in the Central Time Zone. Are you freezing your behind off currently, as I am here in Detroit, Michigan?
Yeah, so I moved out to Minneapolis last year, and yeah, it's in the negatives. It warmed up to like a couple degrees above zero, so yeah, it's pretty cold up here.
Well, we could talk weather all day long, but I have you on here to discuss the Detroit Pistons. And the Pistons have been hot and cold all year long. And, well, a little bit cold against Miami on Wednesday night, losing that contest. No Andre Drummond. Avery Bradley returns after missing 7 games with a strained right groin. And didn't look the greatest. I mean, I can tell just by looking at his plus-minus final stat, which was a -21. So he wasn't good whatsoever. What is his role going to be like now without Reggie Jackson alongside him in the backcourt?
I don't think it'll change that much. I think Avery Bradley will still be the starting shooting guard. I think what will be interesting is who is going to play alongside him.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, who is that guy going to be now on a nightly basis at point guard? Because I know Reggie, I mean, he was a starter, obviously, didn't have a great start to the season, wasn't great before he got hurt, and now he's out until after the All-Star break with an ankle sprain. But who is that guy going to be now at point guard?
That's really hard to tell. I mean, I know that Ish Smith will get the first crack at it, and he's looked pretty decent, actually. Surprisingly, I didn't think he would look as good as he has the past few games. Langston Galloway had his shot early on. If Ish Smith falters, I'd imagine he's next in line. Dwight Bikes is also a candidate, not to start, but to be in the point guard rotation. And then there's always the possibility of a trade down the line. I know the deadline is at some point next month, so I would imagine the Pistons will at least take some calls. But Stan Van Gundy is very coy about all of this trade dealing. So I mean, expect it to be a surprise. If you hear some rumors on Twitter or whatever, take it with a grain of salt.
When Reggie returns after the All-Star break, what should we expect out of him after kind of a lackluster first half out of him this season with the Pistons?
I mean, he's kind of struggled with explosiveness. He was probably the most explosive in 15-16 during his first season with the Pistons. And then last year he kind of struggled with it and eventually had that knee injury. And then this season he's not only been dealing with the knee injury again, he's now hurt his ankle. So I'd imagine we'll see a lot more of an outside shooting Reggie, a mid-range shooting Reggie, not much of attacking the basket as much as he used to, which, in my opinion, could be very problematic for the team because the entire pick and roll with Andre Drummond relies on his ability to get to the rim. And we all saw last year what the result was like when he's not able to get to the rim, the shooters aren't open, the spacing is all messed up, and the offense kind of just sputters.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if Reggie has a long-term future with the Pistons. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
That's also hard to tell. I mean, if he's healthy, I think he's a top 15 point guard in the league. But he really hasn't been. So then it makes you think, okay, well, is it time to move on from him? But then you think to yourself, okay, what is his value? And there were points last season where we were thinking like, wow, this is an immovable asset. We won't even be able to get some sort of second-round pick. And he also has a pretty long contract. I believe through either 2019 or 2020. So he's a little bit of a difficult piece to move. And now that he's hurt, he's probably even more difficult to move. I'm afraid if the Pistons really want to make a push for the playoffs, they'll have to attach him and a couple of future assets to a team that is tanking or a team that is, not on the up and up, maybe a Charlotte, maybe a Sacramento, trying to get a starting caliber point guard to kind of fill that void. But it's going to be a really tough decision for Stan Van Gundy, both through this season and during this offseason as well.
And you were saying it yourself, Shameek, that it looks like Reggie Jackson could be pretty darn immovable because of the injury proneness recently, but also his contract isn't small. It's relatively large as well, so taking on a guy that really has struggled thus far this season and has been injury prone, you have to attach something else to it, which you were saying as well. And, moving on to the Detroit Pistons now as a whole, 28-16 at this point going into Friday night against the rejuvenated Philadelphia 76ers. And they were 16-20 at this point last season. So much improved. But once again, back to my point that really they've been hot and cold a lot this season. Now, more hot than cold and more good than bad. But what would you say? How would you evaluate the season up to this point for the Detroit Pistons?
I kind of disagree. I don't think they were very hot and cold. I think the cold stretch was against a 7 or 8 game stretch against the league's elite teams. And when you have that many games in a row against elite teams, and you're also managing an extra, like a new starter on the, on the team, a couple of new pieces, you're going to experience growing pains. So I think it was kind of a bad mix of things that came into play early in the season. And with that said, I think the season thus far has been a great success. I expected them to be pushing for a 7 or 8 seed at best. And at one point they were leading the conference, and then they kind of were floating with the top 4 for a long time, and they just dropped to 5 after yesterday's loss. But yeah, I think up to this point, it has been a great success. And now with the Reggie injury, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to kind of hang with the upper tier Eastern Conference teams. But I still think a playoff spot is still in play going forward. And it's really going to come down to the development of a couple guys on the team, namely Reggie Bullock, Luke Kennard, Tobias Harris, who's going to shoulder the offense now going forward. Yeah, so I still think a 7 or 8 seed is still in play, but they've overachieved, in my opinion, to this point.
Well, Shameek, the Pistons have to make the playoffs after their great start, and relatively, you said, really, it's been great. They've been a great success, and I think most notably because of the dominant play of Andre Drummond, who's had a great season, not the best year last year. He's bounced back heavily, and his free throw shooting percentage has really improved as well at 62.6% thus far this season, a career high from the charity stripe for Andre Drummond. What would you say has been the reason or have been the reasons for Drummond's great play thus far this season?
Well, that is a huge part of it. The whole hack of Drummond is a thing of the past. He's no longer afraid of getting fouled when he goes up for some putbacks, which you've seen a higher percentage of them this season, and just playing with more confidence without that having to be something hanging over his head is a huge change from last year. And then there's a couple of things that come into play. He had that off-season sinus surgery, which, in my opinion, played a huge role in his energy levels and his aggressiveness on offense and defense, which you've seen definitely an uptick of this season. And I just think they're running plays that fit his play style a lot better. In the past 2 seasons, really, we saw a lot more post-ups, which were extremely inefficient. And I think Duncan had pulled up a stat that Andre Drummond was averaging more points per possession at the free throw line than he was posting up last season, which is mind-blowing. And they still ran that the most out of any play type. But this season, we're seeing a lot more rim running, pick and roll action, dribble handoff action, which is new. And we've seen a little bit of a playmaking Andre Drummond start to emerge, which we've all seen flashes of it in transition. He's throwing nice passes. He's always been kind of a nimble guy, but we really haven't seen him rack up the assists like we have this year either. So he's starting to become an integral part of the offense. And going forward, I like the way he's kind of developing and blossoming. He's still under 25 and he still has a lot of room to grow, but I like him as a long-term asset, and he's definitely contributed to the Pistons' success thus far.
You said how he had that off-season sinus surgery. I need my sinuses rectified as well, so I don't know. Do you know how much that costs, that procedure? I would like to find out because I need that myself, honestly. So I might have to look into that.
I think we all do.
Yeah, right.
I got allergies. Yeah.
I have the year-round stuff. So not great to deal with at all, Shameek. But you know what? Watching Drummond's game has been great all season long. And, he's an all-star. He's got to be an all-star, right?
Yep, I would say so. I'd vote him in.
I think he really has to be voted in as of right now. And it's about the Pistons winning, keeping up their winning ways, too. And I believe if they keep winning leading up to that All-Star break, he's going to get in as a reserve, at least, as he should.
Completely agreed. One of the better big men in the East. I mean, Joel Embiid and him are probably the two best ones in the East. Hassan Whiteside has really fallen off. Dwight Howard is a shell of himself now. So, yeah, I would say he's at least top 2 or top 3 centers in the East, and he's definitely top 5 in the league at this point.
And talking about Embiid a little bit, the Pistons playing the Sixers Friday night here. And Embiid hasn't been playing back-to-back nights yet. And, Colin Cowherd went on a rant on his radio show this week about Embiid not being a legit star because, well, he's not playing consistently enough from game to game. What is your take on that? Does that prevent him from becoming a legitimate star, even though we know he has a game to become that, to become a star, and he has shown that ability throughout the course of this season when he has played?
I mean, it's all baloney. I mean, the whole like, oh, he hasn't played enough to actually solidify himself as a quality starter in this league, a star in this league. It's all baloney. When he is on the floor, and we've seen him be a dominant big man, and I'm saying, double-digit points, double-digit rebounds, assists, blocks. We're seeing him do it on both ends of the court. I mean, the sky is the limit for him, and I don't think we can use his injury past as an indicator for his future.
Yeah, and I think if you're a star, you're a star. He's shown the ability. He has the game. He can score. He can do a lot of things. He's a great young ball player and one of the best players of today, but definitely also of the future. No doubt about that, in my opinion, Shameek. And now, we got to look at, let's make a New Year's resolution for the Detroit Pistons. Now, mine might be to get a girlfriend. I know the Doc, my co-host here, would like for me to make that happen. That's my resolution, I guess. But now for the Pistons, Shameek, as a squad, what do you think is should be their New Year's resolution?
Consistency. The Pistons need to start winning these games against teams like the Heat, teams like the Magic, these teams that they should be beating. I would like to see them start beating them and start being more competitive against the upper tier teams. I mean, it doesn't make sense to drop a game against the Magic and then come out and beat the Spurs, a couple nights after that. So I just want to see consistency from this team, and from a young team that's growing and developing. That's really all you can ask for at this point.
And Shameek Mohile of PistonPower.com, I will let you go with that on Check the Report.
Appreciate it.
And Doc, that was Shameek Mohile of PistonPower.com, a site that I check out for my Pistons news and notes and deep insight. I mean, a guy like Shameek can go in depth, too, with the analysis on the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, Vito, I came across that site through Duncan Smith. Really fascinating look at the numbers in terms of the Detroit Pistons. Shameek does a good job as well. I know people sometimes frown upon what we call blog sites, but there are some good ones that really do provide information. The Athletic, Piston Powered are ones that really do provide good information if you're a basketball fan. And that's why on this week's Check the Report edition, we had James Edwards and Shameek Mohile. Very good stuff.
And you can follow Shameek, by the way, on Twitter via his Twitter handle, at Sham with 2 M's there for the second Sham, God. So it's SHAM, then God. Quite the Twitter handle. I love it. He's a fun follow, by the way, on Twitter as well.
Before we get out of here, you said one of your resolutions was to get a girlfriend. Any other sports resolutions or resolutions that you make for yourself? Obviously, for me, I'm going to definitely work a little bit harder at the craft of podcasting, try to continue to grow the DSP brand, more videos, more interaction, getting out there to more sporting events and things like that. Anything for you personally?
Well, besides for that, now, you probably found that interesting for me to bring that up to Shameek there, but it's an honest one I know from you that you have for me without me bringing it up, as I did there during that segment. But anyways, for the Pistons, I think, as a team, I think it has to be to trade Reggie Jackson, to look for a new starting point guard. And I hope for the sake of the Pistons, with how good they've played for the most part throughout the course of this season thus far, Doc, I hope that Andre Drummond makes the All-Star game. I'm really hoping he does, because he deserves it. After last year, it was a lackluster campaign out of him. He showed little to no effort at times, remember, on both ends of the floor, especially the defensive end, when he should have been showing more. And he's shown more of that effort on a game-to-game basis so far this season. And that's why with his numbers, too, improved, his numbers from the charity stripe at 62.6% at the charity stripe, making his free throws at that percentage, that's a great percentage, something he's never come close to. I think he really deserves to make the All-Star game this year.
Before we get out of here, I definitely, in terms of what goes on in Detroit sports, in future editions of Check the Report, I hope we get a chance to talk about not just Jim Caldwell being fired, not just Jeff Blashill getting fired, but potentially a lot of people need to be broomed from their jobs, meaning Ken Holland, maybe even SVG. Maybe in future editions we'll delve into that because Adam and I on WDFN, we had a conversation regarding SVG's job, and a lot of times when the Pistons don't play well, they play real bad. And so Shameek said it himself. His resolution for the Pistons is consistency.
Yeah.
And a lot of times SVG's come out and said, look, we haven't been ready to play. We haven't looked good enough. And sometimes when your team is not ready to play, that's a reflection on the head coach. And so you have to look at that because SVG is not only the head coach, he's also the team president. And when you start delving into what he's drafted versus what he could have drafted, SVG's seat needs to be a little bit warmer, and it might be on future editions of Check the Report. But the line started the process of getting better. The Pistons are working towards being more consistent and a lot better, but maybe some changes needed for our NFL team, our NHL team, our MLB team, and our NBA team to kind of change what we saw in 2017 because we're no longer going to tolerate that in 2018. It's a new year. You know, they say new year, new me. New year, we need some new storylines in Detroit sports, and it might involve brooming out some of the old guard.
A new year, new V. And really quick, Stanley Johnson hasn't been good enough. You're right. That's maybe a bust that was made by Stan Van Gundy, so we can bring that up. And then losing to the Orlando Magic, like you said, the consistency factor has to improve for the Pistons because you can't get blown out against the Magic, of all teams, who are a better team than last year, perhaps. But still, getting blown out against some, then beating the Spurs when you didn't have Avery Bradley and you were depleted as a squad, how does that happen? It doesn't seem right, but it has thus far from the Detroit Pistons, Doc.
All right, great edition of Check the Report. Thanks again to our guests. Feature guest this week, James Edwards and
Shameek Mohile of PistonPower.com.
See everybody next time. Thank you for listening.